I shouldn't have gone that night. The thought claws at me, a broken record skipping in my mind, as if sheer repetition could somehow rewrite the past. But when she called, her voice a fragile whisper threading through the phone line, softer than the rustle of autumn leaves, saying, "He's not around. If you wanted to, you could still drop by." Reason evaporated. My body, a puppet on a string, moved with a volition of its own. The drive was suffocatingly silent, a vacuum where unspoken possibilities buzzed like trapped bees. My hands clenched the steering wheel, knuckles bone white, each turn a rehearsal for a scene I hadn't scripted, a play with no discernible ending. By the time I reached the house, her porch light cast a lone, melancholic beam onto the hushed street. Felt like a beacon, a secret signal long awaited. The door swung open before my knuckles even grazed the wood. And there she was, Sarah, my best friend's mother. Somewhere between 46 and 47 years old. Her dark hair, usually meticulously styled, was charmingly disheveled, and her sweater sleeves were pushed up her forearms as if she'd been battling a domestic inferno. Except the truth was she hadn't. The kitchen behind her gleamed, a sterile display of stainless steel, and the air was perfumed with the subtle floral of her signature scent, not the savory aroma of a home-cooked meal. "Come in," she breathed almost desperately. Her eyes, the color of warm honey, flickered away, then snapped back to mine. In that fleeting glance, I caught a flicker of something hidden, a truth she desperately tried to conceal. As I stepped inside, the air thickened, becoming a heavy, suffocating blanket. The house mirrored my memories, but the silence vibrated with a sinister frequency. Not the comforting quiet I knew from years spent crashing on their worn couch after late-night adventures. This was the kind of silence where every sound, the scuff of my shoes against the polished floor, the gentle click of the closing door, resonated with exaggerated loudness. "You can sit if you want," she murmured, her fingers lightly grazing a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Her gaze stubbornly avoided mine, but her voice maintained a fragile composure. I perched on the edge of the plush couch like an intruder. She lingered across the room for a moment, arms folded loosely, as if she was gauging the distance, before settling into the armchair beside me. Not too close, but not distant enough to feel entirely safe. We began to talk about the mundane, the insignificant flotsam of everyday life. School, the soul-crushing grind of work, the predictably unpredictable weather. My sentences stumbled and stuttered. Her responses stretched, elongated into drawn-out narratives. In between, the pauses hung like a loaded gun, each second compressing my chest until I could barely breathe. Her hand rested on the chair's armrest, fingers tapping out a nervous rhythm. I became acutely aware of the smallest details. The slight forward tilt of her body when she listened, the unconscious way she worried the inside of her lip when searching for the right words. Then, she laughed at something I said, a genuine, unrestrained sound that filled the room, enveloping me in a sudden warmth. She instinctively pressed her palm against her lips afterward, as if regretting the momentary lapse. That laugh did something. It broke the distance a little. Or maybe it made it more dangerous. "You've grown up," she said abruptly, her voice a velvet caress. Her gaze lingered on me, then darted away as if burned. "It's strange. I still picture you younger." My throat constricted. Words failed me, so I remained silent. But I caught another furtive glance, quick and sharp, as if she was checking to see if I'd heard the words she hadn't intended to say. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked with relentless volume. My knee bounced with nervous energy. I desperately wanted to fill the void with speech, but the words remained trapped. She leaned back, exhaled slowly, and without meeting my eyes, she whispered, "I shouldn't have asked you over tonight." The air in the room crackled with electricity. Before I could respond, before I could even twitch, her phone, resting on the table between us, erupted in a jarring buzz. The screen illuminated with a name I couldn't decipher from my vantage point. She froze, her hand hovering over the device, paralyzed. Instead of answering, she met my gaze, her eyes locking onto mine. And in that charged look, An unspoken truth, a feeling we both harbored but dared not voice, hung precariously between us. The buzzing ceased. The silence descended again, heavier than before, and a chilling realization washed over me. Nothing about this night would be ordinary. The phone stopped buzzing, but the silence it left in its wake roared louder than the insistent vibrations. Her hand remained poised above the phone, her fingers twitching as if anticipating its resurrection. Then, she abruptly withdrew her hand and folded it neatly in her lap. "You don't have to stay long," she said quietly. "I just felt strange to sit here by myself tonight." There was more to it, a tangled web of unspoken emotions, but she offered no further explanation. I nodded, even though a part of me desperately yearned to stay. She settled back into her chair, her shoulders slumping slightly. It was the first time I'd witnessed the erosion of her perfect facade, the carefully constructed image of composure she always projected. For years, she'd been the pillar of strength, the one holding everything together. House, family, an unwavering fortitude that made her seem invincible. But here, tonight, she looked fragile, exhausted, human. "My husband used to travel a lot," she said suddenly, her voice almost casual, although her eyes remained fixed on a point beyond me. "Nights like this, it was always just me and the quiet. You'd think I'd be used to it by now." I shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether she expected a response. My friend had casually mentioned that his father had moved out a few years ago. I hadn't pried then. It felt like forbidden territory. Now, sitting across from her, I was consumed by a desperate urge to ask, to understand. Instead, I said, "I don't like quiet either. Makes me think too much." A faint smile flickered across her face. Exactly. The way she delivered that single word, as if we shared a private, deeply understood secret, pulled me closer than I dared to be. Her gaze swept over me again, lingering a heartbeat too long before retreating. "You've changed since high school," she said, her tone lighter now, almost teasing. "Your hair is longer, and you don't mumble as much." I laughed nervously. Guess I finally grew up. Something unreadable flickered across her features. Maybe regret, maybe longing. I couldn't quite pinpoint it. But inside me, the thoughts I'd been desperately suppressing surged to the surface. She was my best friend's mother. She'd witnessed me at 14, braces and bad haircuts, awkwardly navigating their kitchen after school. She was supposed to be a constant, a safe harbor, untouchable. And yet, the way she looked at me tonight was anything but. I desperately tried to conjure all the reasons this was wrong. The age disparity, the unwavering loyalty I owed to her son, the inherent danger of even entertaining the idea. But my chest ached with a weight I couldn't deny. She shifted in her chair, her hand brushing against the couch cushion beside her, as if she were contemplating moving closer, yet holding herself back. Then, softer than I anticipated, she said, "Do you remember that summer? You must have been 16. You helped me paint the porch. You stayed until the sun went down." I remembered it all too vividly. Her hair tied up in a messy bun, the back of her neck glistening with sweat, me stealing furtive glances when I thought she wouldn't notice. "You wouldn't stop complaining about the heat," she added, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. "But you stayed." Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, neither of us looked away. The weight of that shared memory pressed between us, and before I could stop myself, I reached out. A subtle, almost imperceptible gesture, my fingers brushing the back of her hand where it rested on the cushion. She didn't flinch. She didn't withdraw. And in that charged stillness, I knew something fundamental had shifted. Her hand remained beneath mine, just the back of it, the lightest of touches, but it felt like an unbearable electric shock. My pulse throbbed in my ears. I instinctively wanted to pull away, but she remained frozen, and that motionless contact spoke volumes. Then, 3 sharp, insistent knocks reverberated through the house. She jolted, her hands slipping out from under mine. The fragile connection shattered like glass. I sat back abruptly, my heart hammering against my ribs, as she rose and hurried toward the entryway. Her voice carried low as she opened the door. It was my friend, her son. I could only discern his silhouette in the doorway, taller than me, leaning against the frame with his usual restless energy. "Hey, Mom. Forgot my charger," he said casually. "I'll just grab it." Her voice was steady, too steady. "It's in your room. Don't stay long." He brushed past her, his sneakers squeaking against the hardwood floor. I sat rigid on the couch, desperately trying to appear nonchalant, as if I wasn't on the verge of spontaneous combustion. He glanced at me briefly, then smirked. "Didn't know you were here, man." "Yeah," I managed, clearing my throat. "Just hanging out." He disappeared down the hall. The silence stretched again, different this time, heavy with unspoken danger. She closed the front door halfway, as if to shield the world outside from our secret. Then, she moved back into the room, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She didn't sit down. "He can't know," she whispered. I swallowed hard. My voice barely functioned. "I know." Her eyes darted toward the hallway, then back to me. For a split second, I thought she might banish me, erase the last hour entirely. Instead, she sat back down, but not beside me. Across from me. Distance, but not enough. My friend's footsteps grew louder. He reappeared, charger in hand, already distracted. "All right, I'm out. Don't stay up too late, Mom." "Drive safe," she replied, her tone clipped and unnatural. The door clicked shut. The sound of his car accelerating filled the silence, then faded into the night. We didn't move. We didn't speak. Finally, she whispered, This can't happen." Her words were sharp, but her eyes contradicted her, betraying the uncertainty simmering beneath the surface. I leaned forward, acting before thought could interfere. "Then why did you ask me over?" Her breath hitched. She pressed her fingers to her temple, shaking her head slightly, as if attempting to erase the truth before it escaped. I thought I could handle it, that it was harmless." "It doesn't feel harmless," I said, my voice low, the words tumbling out before reason could intercept. Her gaze locked with mine, neither of us breathing. I almost leaned in. I almost did the one thing I'd been fighting since I crossed the threshold tonight. But she stood abruptly, pushing her chair back with a screech. "No," she said, almost to herself. "Not now." She turned toward the kitchen, her back to me, her shoulders rigid with tension. I remained frozen on the couch, my hands clenched into fists. Every fiber of my being yearned to follow, to diminish the distance, to prove that she wasn't alone in this magnetic pull. We both kept trying to fight. Instead, I remained silent, the unspoken words suffocating the room. And in that stillness, the truth pressed harder than ever. The more desperately we tried to resist, the closer we were being drawn together. The kitchen light spilled across the floor, casting a pale glow that dissected the shadows of the living room. She stood motionless, her back turned, one hand braced against the counter. Her shoulders rose and fell unevenly, as if she was struggling to control her breathing. I couldn't remain seated any longer. The silence was unbearable. I stood and crossed the room slowly, each step echoing with exaggerated resonance. "You can't just pretend nothing's happening," I said softly. She flinched at the sound of my voice, but didn't turn. "You don't know what you're saying." "I do." My words emerged sharper than intended. "I've never been more sure about anything." Finally, she spun around. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, her arms wrapped tightly around her chest. "You're a kid compared to me. Do you even understand what this would mean?" I almost laughed, a bitter, nervous sound. "I'm not a kid. Not anymore. And you're acting like I don't see you, like I don't know you." Her lips parted, but no words materialized. She shook her head, as if the entire argument was slipping from her grasp. "You think I don't notice?" I pressed on, my voice trembling. "The way you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention. The way you called me tonight knowing he wasn't here." Her face hardened, but her eyes betrayed her, shimmering with a potent mix of guilt and desire. "Stop," she whispered. "I can't," I admitted. My chest ached with the confession, the words bursting forth like a dam had broken, releasing years of pent-up emotion. I think about you all the time and I don't know how to stop. The ensuing silence was brutal. My heart pounded against my ribs. Finally, she whispered, "Do you know what you're doing to me?" Her voice cracked on the last word, raw and exposed. She moved toward me, one hesitant step, her arms falling to her sides. For the first time, she didn't hide behind composure or distance. "I wake up some mornings and I swear I see you sitting at this table like you used to," she said, her voice trembling. 16, 17, grinning at me over a bowl of cereal. "And then I see you now, standing in front of me like this, and She stopped abruptly, biting down hard on her lip. The space between us dissolved. I hadn't even registered that I had moved closer until I felt the warmth of her breath against my skin. My hand hovered at my side, itching to reach out, paralyzed by the potential consequences. Her eyes locked on mine, wide and desperate. "This can ruin everything," she whispered. "Or it can change everything," I whispered back. The clock ticked once, twice. Her hand twitched at her side, as if she were wrestling with the impulse to reach out, to push me away. I couldn't decipher her intention. And then, just before anything could happen, the jarring sound of keys rattling in the front door shattered the tension. We froze, our bodies rigid. The knob turned, the door creaked open, and every unspoken truth threatened to erupt, spilling into the open all at once. The door creaked wider, and for a split second, my heart ceased to beat. But it wasn't him. It was her ex-husband. He stepped inside with an air of familiarity. The smell of rain clung to his jacket, and his footsteps were heavy against the floorboards. Her body stiffened, every trace of warmth evaporating from her face. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was sharp, brittle. "Forgot some papers in the office," he said casually, his eyes scanning the room. His gaze flickered over me and then back to her. "Didn't realize you had company." The word company hung in the air, pregnant with unspoken accusations. My throat constricted. I desperately wanted to disappear, to become one with the couch, but she interjected quickly. "He's just visiting. Dropped by to help me with something." Her ex-husband smirked, unconvinced. "At this hour?" His gaze slid back to me, sharper now, probing in a way that made my skin crawl. She stepped closer to him, using her body as a shield between us. "Get what you came for and leave." For a heartbeat I thought he might challenge her. His jaw tightened. His eyes flicked between us, deciphering something we hadn't dared to voice. But he simply shrugged and disappeared down the hall. The second he was gone, she turned to me. "You need to go," she whispered, her voice laced with urgency. Her words cut deeper than I expected. "So that's it." I kept my voice low, but the hurt seeped through. "You don't understand." "No, I do," I interrupted, my chest burning. "I sit here wanting something I shouldn't. And you what? Pretend it's not real. Push me away the second someone might see." She flinched. "This isn't about you." That stung more than it should have. Her ex-husband's footsteps grew louder. He reappeared, a folder in hand, his eyes lingering on us again. This time, his smirk held a knowing cruelty. "Funny, you always hated having people here late. Guess things change." She didn't respond. She simply gripped the back of the chair until her knuckles strained white. He left a minute later, slamming the front door with unnecessary force. The reverberating sound filled the house, leaving behind a silence thick with unshed tears. I rose from the couch, my fists clenched at my sides. "If this is going to be a secret forever, if I'm just some mistake you're afraid of, tell me now." Her breath hitched, her lips parted, but no words emerged. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know how to do this." Something within me fractured. The vulnerability in her voice wasn't a rejection. It was fear, and yet the doubt remained. My best friend, her complicated past, the ex-husband who clearly suspected something. Nothing felt secure anymore, and the truth we were circling was about to cost us both more than we could ever imagine. The slam of the door still echoed through the house, but it was the ensuing silence that threatened to break me. She stood frozen, her hands still gripping the back of the chair, as if she needed it for support. I took a step toward her. "Say something." Her eyes flicked up to mine, wide and uncertain. "What do you want me to say?" "That I." Her voice cracked. She choked back the words, shaking her head. "Yes," I said, my voice shaking. "Exactly that." She exhaled sharply, a sound that resembled a bitter laugh. "You don't get it. If this comes out, your friend, my son, the whole neighborhood, I can't just. I don't care about them." I cut in, my voice louder than intended. My chest heaved. "I care about you." The words hung in the air, too heavy to retract, too exposed to deny. Her face softened, but it wasn't relief that washed over her features. It was pain. "You're too young to throw yourself into this. Stop calling me young." I pleaded, my voice cracking. "You're the only one who's ever made me feel like I'm not invisible, like I matter. You think that's something I can just walk away from?" Her hands slipped from the chair. She pressed them to her mouth, her shoulders trembling. For a moment, I was convinced she was going to order me to leave, to retract everything. But then she crossed the space between us in 2 swift steps. Her hands grasped my arms, her fingers trembling against my skin. "You have no idea what you're doing to me," she whispered, her forehead almost touching mine. I froze, every nerve ending on fire. "Then show me," I whispered back. She shut her eyes, a single tear escaping. Her breath hitched as she released it, and then she leaned in. Her lips hovered so close that I could taste the promise of them. But at the last moment, she pulled back, shoving herself away. "God, this is wrong." The rawness in her voice gutted me. I caught her wrist before she could retreat further. "Wrong doesn't feel like this." My voice was low, desperate. "This is real." Her eyes connected with mine again, raw and vulnerable, with no defenses remaining. "And if I say yes?" The question hung in the air, charged with both possibility and peril. I swallowed hard, my voice barely a whisper. "Then I'm not letting go. Not tonight. Not ever." For a long moment we simply stood there, 2 people balanced on the precipice of a choice that could shatter everything they knew. And then, slowly, her hand slipped into mine. No passionate embrace, no grand declaration, just that simple gesture. Her fingers tightened around mine. Her silence spoke volumes, conveying what her words could not. It wasn't neat, it wasn't safe, but it was real. And for the first time we weren't running. Her hand in mine was enough to quell the turmoil within me. No kiss, no promises, just that trembling grasp. And yet, it felt more profound than anything I'd ever experienced. We stood in the dim kitchen light, neither of us speaking. The silence was no longer oppressive. It was delicate, as fragile as spun glass. One misspoken word, one wrong move, and it could shatter irrevocably. Finally, she pulled back slightly, not to release my hand, but to look at me. Her voice was quiet, unsteady. This doesn't make anything simple." "I don't want simple," I said. "I just want you." Her eyes searched mine, testing whether I truly grasped the weight of my words. But I did. Perhaps I couldn't foresee all the consequences. Perhaps I couldn't envision the future. But I knew the truth that stood before me. She let out a small, trembling laugh. "You sound so certain." "Because I am." For a moment she didn't respond. Then, slowly, her head dipped, her forehead resting lightly against mine. It wasn't a kiss, not yet. But it was enough to send a jolt of electricity through me, weakening my knees. "You'll hate me one day," she whispered. "Never," I whispered back. We remained like that until the grandfather clock in the hall chimed midnight. The sound snapped us back to reality. She straightened, her hands still clasped in mine. We can't pretend this is nothing. If we keep going, people will find out. He'll find out." I nodded. The fear in her words was palpable, but so was the undeniable connection between us. "Then we don't pretend. We figure it out." Her breath caught. A small smile, sad and hopeful, touched her lips. "You're too stubborn for your own good." I almost said, "So are you." But instead, I just squeezed her hand tighter. That night didn't end with fireworks or dramatic pronouncements of love. It ended with us sitting side by side on the couch, her shoulder brushing against mine, the quiet enfolding us in a way that finally felt natural. We talked about mundane things, my college courses, her garden, the changing landscape of the neighborhood. The words themselves weren't important. What mattered was the fact that we were no longer hiding. When I eventually stood to leave, she walked me to the door. The porch light flickered softly above us. For a fleeting moment, neither of us moved, and then, without hesitation, she leaned in. The kiss was gentle, brief, almost tentative, but it was real. Real enough to make my chest ache. Real enough to erase every doubt. When she pulled back, her eyes locked with mine. "Go," she whispered, "before I stop you from leaving." I smiled, unable to contain myself. "You couldn't." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "Don't be so sure." I stepped out into the night, the cool air washing over me, my lips still tingling from hers. Whatever lay ahead, questions, consequences, hushed whispers, paled in comparison to the truth of that moment. We'd crossed the line together, and there was no turning back.